Good afternoon, folks, and welcome along to what I hope will be the first of many videos throughout the 2025 flat season. My name is James Boyle. I've been betting on horse racing for the last 10 or 15 years. Lots of good times, lots more bad times, and some times that were in between, but for the most part it's been an enjoyable experience. In terms of last year's results, I do a daily column over on gambling.com. Previously it was on the independent.co.uk. And the flat season for the most part was quite good. It had almost 400 bets, had around 40 winners and made a profit of 76.55 points for a 16% return on investment. In terms of the bets themselves, they'd be generally averaging out at around the 12 to 1 mark. I do like to play on the higher side of it, so of course that brings with it a lot of mediocre losing runs and spells where you're running colder than ice. Unfortunately, the last few months have been particularly poor. But anyway, we move on now to the turf season. It's the time of year that I enjoy the most, and hopefully everything will go to plan and the profits will start coming back in again. In terms of staking, almost all of my bets are win only. Occasionally there will be each way bets whenever I do think that the place part is worthwhile, but I would anticipate I continue at anywhere between 90 and 95% of them will be win only. The range of staking that I use is between a 1 and a 3 point scale. Again, 90 or 95% of them bets will be 1 point wins, and then be a mix of 1 point each way and 2 point wins. They would be on the rarer scale of things though. Anybody who is wanting to follow my bets, I would recommend having a decent betting bank, anywhere between 125, 150 points to stay comfortable during the inevitable downturns would be advised. And if all goes to plan over time, I'd expect that whatever you stake, you should be making anywhere between 12 and 15% profit. In terms of the longer term plan with these videos, I'll be aiming to get them up on a Thursday evening or a Friday morning, covering the whatever big race is on offer on the Saturday. Try to see what sort of value is lying in the market and whether we can find a few winners. In terms of my daily bets, they'll remain on gambling.com. I'll be doing 4 or 5 days worth of bets every single week, anywhere between 1 and 4 selections on the column, and hopefully we can get back to winning ways at some time in the near future. Now that brings us on to the Lincoln Handicap. It's a typically competitive large field, so there'll be a bit of working out to do to try and land on some decent bets, but hopefully we'll be able to do exactly that. The moment the ground is good to soft in places, it does look like the weather will be fairly decent in the lead up to the race, so I'd imagine that'll get a little bit better between now and race time. At the moment, Thunder Run is heading the market at around 13 to 2. He's one of Carl Burke's runners and seems to be fairly well fancied. I think his form last year was pretty solid. He won a valuable race at York in August, and he finished off his season by finishing 4th in the Balmoral Handicap at Ascot. Don't think things really panned out too well from that day. He was up towards the front of the field on a fairly demanding surface, and didn't really get home as well as some strong finishers that were coming from the back. The fact that he was unraced as a juvenile, he's only a 4-year-old now, there's a good chance that there's more to come, but whether he's worth bothering with at that sort of price at the moment is up for debate. He's a mark of 100 as well, which, whilst it should be workable in the longer term, is probably not a gimme. Second in the market, Midnight Gun, he's around 7 to 1 at the moment. He has a mark of 101. He's well bred. He's out of Sky Lantern, who was a multiple Group 1 winner. He improved for experience as things went along last season and ended up his season finishing second to Harper's Ferry over course and distance. He was just unable to run that rival down, which I don't think is necessarily anything to be ashamed of. Chances are that he's going to be another that'll be getting better as the season goes along. He's been gelded and looks like he's going to be a player. Native Warrior is the other that's in the market at single figures at the moment. He looks like he could be on a fairly reasonable mark at 93, although James Doyle has obviously chosen to ride Midnight Gun, which is a sort of maybe a less than an indicator towards his chance. He had a good season last year, though. He placed at Royal Ascot and Glorious Goodwood. He did flop over course and distance when he was last seen in September, but might have had enough for the season. He's another who's been gelded since we last got to see him on the racetrack. And if he learns to relax a little bit better, I do think there's a chance that he's going to be involved in the finish. The fact that he does stay further than the bare mile as well is a positive for his chances. And I can understand if anybody is keen on on taking a punt on him. Last year's second in the race, Latam, is currently in at around the 12-1 mark. He had a fairly light campaign overall. He also finished second in the Balmoral Handicap when he was last seen in October. Assuming he's fit, I'd say there's a good chance he'll grind away for a lot longer than some of the others. But at the same time, a mark of 97 is a fairly difficult one, and I think this year's renewal is better than the one last year. So just be interesting to see how he gets on, but he wouldn't exactly be one that I'd be overly interested in. Then we have Godwinson. He's around the 14-1 mark at the moment. That could be considered a fairly decent price. Now, he was unlucky not to win first time up last year in the Spring Cup at Newbury. Didn't really build on that afterwards, but he did score at Goodwood in August. Conditions shouldn't be a problem. Mark is still workable, and there's a good chance that he's going to be finding some further improvement as a 5-year-old. So he's definitely one for my shortlist at the moment. I always thought there was a chance that he could rate as a fairly high-grade handicapper. He obviously hasn't got there at the moment, but there's a good chance that this season we'll be seeing a little bit more out of him. Next up, we've Oliver Show at around 14-1. He's 4 from 9 on the all-weather, 0 from 7 on the turf. I'm not really sure there's a whole pile in hand from 95, so I'm happy enough to overlook him altogether. Then we have Tony Martin's runner, Orandi. He won the Irish Lincoln a couple of weeks ago at the Curragh. Thought he was quite impressive there. He travelled through the race quite nicely and quickened up fairly well when he was asked to go about and win his race. There was probably a little bit in hand. £5 penalty now. Whether he's going to be able to handle the quick turnaround between two fairly demanding handicaps is a question mark that I'd have. And this race looks a little bit better than the Irish version, so he'd be one that I'd swerve. You have Magnus Opus for Simon and Ed Crisford. He won in Dubai last month. He's obviously in fairly good form at the moment. The ground drying up would be in favour for him. I just don't know whether he has that much in hand from a mark of 96 at this point. Then we're on to Whipcracker. He's around 16-1 at the moment for Richard Hughes and Findlay Marsh. He was very heavily backed on his seasonal return in the Lincoln trial at Wolverhampton. I was hoping to see him go a bit further forward in the field that day, but he sat midfield. It didn't really work out for him, but he was still running on fairly strongly at the finish. I think there's a chance that his mark is fairly workable based on a couple of his showings last season. He is the type that could appreciate a big field, and at 16-1 currently, he's one that would be definitely on my shortlist. Then we get on to David Menezes' Toy My Son. He's about 20-1 at the moment. Warren Fentiman is booked to remove £5. He won the Golden Mile at Glorious Goodwood last season. Solid efforts in defeating some fairly decent handicaps afterwards, including finishing fourth behind Godwinson. The only problem with him is he's £9 higher in the weights now compared to when he did win at Goodwood, and I think he'll remain vulnerable to less exposed types, assuming that they run to their races and find a bit of improvement. So he's not really one for today, but maybe further down the line. Alpha Crucis for Gary and Josh Moore. He's 25-1 at the moment. He was fourth in the race last year under a rider who wasn't exactly a huge assistance in the saddle. Only problem, he's half a stone higher now after a couple of heavy ground wins at the back end of last season. I think there's a chance he could run on into a place, but whether he's going to be good enough to win this, I'd very much doubt it. Then we're on to Appearist. He's about 25-1 at the moment for Kevin Ryan and Tom Eves. He's been making hay over the winter on the all-weather. He's won 3 out of his last 5. Only problem, mark is getting very high now, and whether he can hack it at this level does remain to be seen. The only thing that is in his favour, he's quite a strong traveller, so it does add a little bit of hope, but at the same time, I do think the mark is a little bit on the high side. Then you have Ed Bettles' runner, Old Cock, who's getting backed in at the moment. He was 25-1 this morning. He was the last horse to make the cut off a mark of 91. Thought he moved through his last win at Haydock last August very well. He was a bit disappointed at York afterwards. I don't really know whether he's up to this level so far and why he's being back into 14-1. I'm not really so sure. He'd be one that I'd be happy enough to ignore altogether. But at the same time, the way he did travel in that Haydock race does catch the eye a little bit, but there's a different ball game altogether. Then we're on to 33-1 and bigger shots. Dual Identity is running for William Knight. He does stay a little bit further, which is probably no harm in some of these races, and he can travel through his races quite nicely. Mark should be fine, but he's drawn out in the wing, and I'd say he's one to be of more interest once he gets towards the likes of Sandown later in the season, which is a track where he does seem to go particularly well. Fantastic Fox, 33s as well for Roger Varian, running well on the all-weather of late. Just mark a 96. I don't think there's a whole pile of room for manoeuvre in a race like this. if the splits did come from, he is a good mover on his day and he finishes races fast sometimes, but I don't know whether he's worth bothering with. Then you get down to Galeron, who's coming back following spending last season in Australia. He has top weight of America 102. I don't really know much about the Australian form. I just do know that I wouldn't be that keen on punching him at that sort of price. If he's fit and ready to go, maybe on some of the form he showed as a 3-year-old, he'd have a chance, but it just doesn't really look that worthwhile to me. Mr. Professor won the race at a big price last year. Big price once again. Only problem, he's done absolutely nothing since. He's £4 higher in the weights, and unless they've got him firing at home, there's a good chance that he won't be repeating the trick. John and Teddy Gosden have Orn in here at 33s as well. He was last seen, his last 4 runs have come in sprints. He's up to a mile now. He does stay the trip, so that shouldn't be a problem, but he'd want to be showing a little bit more now before I'd get interested in him. Mark is coming down though, he's down to 97, so maybe if he's been primed and he's physically ready for it, there could be a chance he'd get involved. He does have a touch of class on his day, but at the same time, he's not one for me. Then at 40-1, we get down to Sean for Jamie Osborne. I think there's a chance that he could get involved now. He does have joint top weight, which is not necessarily ideal, but he ran in a Group 2 last time 4 weeks ago out in Maidan. He was much better the time before when he was in a handicap over a mile and 1 around there. He's the same mark again today. I don't think he's one to totally dismiss out of hand, but at the same time, he would want to find a little bit of improvement. The one thing that is definitely in his favour is the fact that the ground is drying up. If it was to stay on the soft side, I wouldn't have given him much of a chance at all, but now he's getting a little bit more interesting than he was beforehand. Jonathan Portman has 2 tempting in here. He's 40-1 as well. I'd imagine he'll sharpen up for his run at Wolverhampton last time. That was in the Lincoln trial as well. It's quite a slowly run race. It's hard for him to take too literally, but he did shape up well enough. The only problem now, he's £3 above his highest ever winning mark. I think 98 is quite tight for him now, and they might want to get a few pounds down off his back before he goes back running at the likes of Sandown and some of those tracks that he was successful at last season. Then we're getting down towards the rags of the field. 66s at the moment. Dashing Darcy for Jeff Harker. He was with Roger Varian last year. Ran a few fairly decent races, got caught out in a higher grade when he ran in the Britannia at Royal Ascot, when he finished mid-division that day. But on some of his form, now you could be inclined to think that a mark of 92 is workable. He'll handle the ground. That won't be a problem to him at all. It just depends on whether he's ready. He's been off the track since October. The yard did pay over 100 grand for him though, so it will be interesting to see how he gets on. I would have had more interest in him if he had got into the consolation race, but obviously he didn't. And then the last runner in the 22 strong field is Berger for Alan King. He's 100-1 at the moment and hasn't been seen since May of 2023, so there's absolutely no chance that I'd be taking a punt on him. Right, so that's just a brief rundown of all of the runners that are set to line up in the Lincoln. In terms of who I'm actually going to be backing, Midnight Gun was very tempting. Now, if he drifts out on the day, he's currently around the 7-1 mark. If he did head out on the exchange, which is not an impossible scenario, I'd say there's a good chance I'd add him onto my list as well. I think he's a nice horse with a bit more to offer as he learns and gets a bit more experience on the track. I am going to play 2 horses in this. The first one will be Godwin's Son for William Haggis and Kieran Fallon. I'm not 100% sure about his draw in 3. He could end up stuck out on the wing, which wouldn't necessarily be ideal, but I punted him on his seasonal return last year when he was running in the Spring Cup. He was very unlucky not to win that. I know that he's £6 higher in the weights now, but there's a good chance with experience and getting to run in a contest where they should be setting off with a fairly solid gallop. I'd imagine that he's capable of showing a little bit more. Ground won't be a problem. In fact, it probably should be pretty spot on for him. I just have a feeling that he's better than a 94 horse if everything went to plan, and obviously he's been trained by a top trainer, so if he's ready to go, should be no excuses whatsoever. And then the other one I'm going to back is one that at least we're guaranteed he's going to be fit, and that's Whipcracker for Richard Hughes. He's 16-1 at the moment. Generally, I think that's a very fair price. I wouldn't judge him on his run in the Lincoln trial at all. I think that was quite a sedate pace after they went fairly hard early on. It didn't really work out for him, but he was still coming there, hitting the line quite strong. I think there's a good chance that he's capable of better than what he was showing as a 3-year-old. He hasn't had too many goes on the track either, and then he has some decent form behind the likes of JRB, and he travelled very strongly again behind Alpha Cruises at Goodwood. Just strikes me as a horse that's going to be landing a big handicap at some point, and hopefully there's a good chance that it's going to be this one. So that's my 2 against the field. Godwinson at 14-1 and Whipcracker at 16s, and fingers crossed they'll be giving us a decent run for our money.